impact a jury pool and the case moving forward?
All right, President Trump taking some heavy criticism for politicizing Tuesday's terror attack in Manhattan, and he may have made things worse with this late-night tweet. He said this: NYC terrorist was happy as he asked to hang ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12, should get death penalty. That tweet came after the suspect was charged in court with providing material support to ISIS, which does carry the death penalty.
Legal experts quick to point out this sort of public suggestion could taint any jury pool if the suspect is tried in New York. This came hours after Mr. Trump lashed out at the United States justice system.
We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. And we need strong justice, much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughing stock.
All right, let's go live to Washington to bring in a CNN reporter, political reporter Tal Copen. The laughing stock, you know, he's saying that the entire United States justice system is a joke. This person was caught quickly, has already had a court hearing and has been charged. And one of the charges actually does carry the death penalty. So do we know what he's exactly talking about?
No, we don't, is the simple answer, Christine. And, you know, Sarah Sanders, of course, was asked about this in the press briefing yesterday and tried to explain it as if Trump was referring to what other people think of the justice system. That was her interpretation.
Let's play how Sarah Sanders reacted.
He said the process has people calling us a joke and calling us a laughing stock. He's simply pointing out his frustration of how long that this process takes, how costly this process is.
Yeah, exactly. So you just heard what the president said and how Sarah Sanders explained it, and they don't really seem to line up. That certainly could be how she interprets his words. But, you know, what I would love to hear is some of the Republicans in Congress who are major criminal justice reform advocates, you know, the Rand Pauls, the Mike Lees. When you talk about due process rights in the Constitution, there are very clear rights in the Constitution about what a fair trial is. And there are some staunch defenders of that on the Supreme Court, in Congress, that don't necessarily line up by party. And so what the president seems to be suggesting is some way to bypass that if a person is believed to be a terrorist, which certainly goes against most of our common law decisions in the United States and arguably against some of the provisions in the Constitution. So it's unclear what he is talking about here. At the same time, you know, this seems to be sort of typical Trump rhetoric, and it's hard to know how much stock exactly to put into what he's saying.
Yeah, they got to get a teleprompter in that cabinet room because, and perhaps before he tweets too, because the president tweeting late last night, quote, New York City terrorist happy as he asked to hang ISIS flag on his hospital room, killed 8 people, badly injured 12, should get the death penalty. No one's going to disagree with the notion that this suspect deserves the death penalty. But how might that impact a case as we move forward?
Well, I'm just picturing a defense attorney polling the jury and asking all of them, do you see the president's tweets? It's truly a remarkable scenario if you step back for a moment and think, to imagine what a defense attorney might do with this type of material to, you know, ask Americans who, I think the vast majority right now are aware of what the president is up to, whether they could potentially be swayed in a criminal trial. It's just a remarkable situation to even be in right now. And, you know, once again, we talk about, you know, the candidate Trump sort of never went away to a certain extent. And this is once again sort of appealing to his base, appealing to the public. It's not exactly thinking about the potential ramifications down the road. And the other interesting piece of this is divulging so much information from the investigation, from how the suspect got here to what he's been saying to potential other individuals that this suspect may have been connected to. I mean, the president is really revealing a lot before law enforcement, which is another remarkable phenomenon we're watching.
There was also, at one point yesterday, he was saying this guy should be sent to Guantanamo Bay, which does not jive with what Sarah Sanders was saying about how costly things are and how long the process takes, because that's this legal limbo that lasts for years. But putting that aside, let's talk about the diversity lottery. You cover immigration. I have covered immigration extensively, sadly to say, because it is very complicated, and it's like banging your head against a wall trying to figure out whether Washington will ever get it right here. This is what the president said about the diversity lottery.
Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. It's not good. It hasn't been good. We've been against it. So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it.
1990, Chuck Schumer was a sponsor of it. The president bashing Chuck Schumer, but in the group of 8, they wanted to get rid of this in comprehensive immigration reform. Do you think anything changes here?
Yeah, so talk about the diversity lottery for a second. So what it does is it sets aside 50,000 visas that can pave the way for green cards and eventually citizenship every year. And those go to individuals from countries that typically don't send a lot of immigrants here. In fact, if you send a certain number, your country is ineligible for the lottery. And it was sort of conceived as a way to diversify the immigrant pool to the U.S. and draw from a number of countries. The major complaint about it is that it doesn't necessarily select individuals based on matching skills to needs in the U.S. Certainly, opponents of a lot of forms of immigration complain about competing for American jobs. And so, yes, in fact, Chuck Schumer, as one of the leaders of the Gang of Eight compromise in 2013, was part of a deal to overhaul the diversity lottery. There is a lot of support for that idea and trying to figure out a way to wrap diversity as a factor into other forms of merit-based immigration. The problem is the proposal that the president has supported would get rid of it and not move those visas anywhere else and really cut in half the number of green cards given out a year, transform the way they're given out. That proposal doesn't have a lot of support in Washington.
All right, Tal Copen, now you have a good piece up on CNN.com about, does the president's rhetoric match his actions when it comes to his budget suggestions? We'll talk about that in about 30 minutes.
All right, thanks. As for the terror investigation, Saifullah Saipov now charged with providing material support to ISIS. Authorities say the Uzbekistan native self-radicalized in America after arriving on that visa in 2010.
The complaint against him says he chose to strike on Halloween because he believed there'd be more civilians on the street. We get more now from CNN's Jason Carroll.
Christine, Dave, the suspect, appeared in federal court last night. He appeared in a wheelchair. He did not enter a plea. That will come later. He is facing 2 counts, including providing material support to a terrorist organization, that organization being ISIS. The U.S. attorney has 30 days to indict, and at that time, that is when he's expected to enter a plea. But he's already learning more about his connection to ISIS from a letter that was left behind near the truck, which basically was written in Arabic and in English, which included ISIS propaganda. Christine, Dave?
All right, Jason Carroll, thanks for that. New concerns about North Korea's nuclear capabilities one day before President Trump takes off for Asia. CNN has learned the North Koreans are already working on an advanced version of their existing KN-20 intercontinental ballistic missiles that could potentially reach the United States. All this unfolding less than 6 months after North Korea's first ICBM launch. The development of an advanced ICBM is just one element of Kim Jong-un's nuclear acceleration. U.S. officials say additional upgrades are underway to the regime's nuclear fuel, missile launchers, and guidance and targeting systems. Troubling developments.
All right, 4:10 in Houston, Texas. Anybody still up in Houston? Tweet us if you are. Plenty of joy there this morning. We are the champions.
Big reveal on the long-awaited tax bill. A day after missing a self-imposed deadline, disagreements over key details remain. To be honest, we don't know what's in this yet. So it really will be the big reveal. House Ways and Means Chair Kevin Brady is set to release it this morning. Here's what we expect. A simpler tax code removing most breaks. Big tax cuts for individuals and businesses. President Trump has a catchy name for the plan, the cut bill. That's according to a source in touch with multiple White House officials. Trump has consistently advocated significant cuts, even as the Republicans struggle to explain how to pay for them. One way, getting rid of tax breaks, like the popular state and local tax deduction. Nixing that would raise more than $1 trillion. But Republicans from high-tax states don't want to touch that one because it affects mainly middle-class households. So tax writers may keep part of it, namely for property taxes.
Police in Thornton, Colorado, looking for a murderer on the loose this morning. They're putting out this picture of a person they want to speak with about the shooting at Walmart. Authorities are warning the gunman is armed and dangerous. They're calling it a random act. The suspect shot and killed 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all shot inside the store. The female victim pronounced dead after being transported to a local hospital. We'll bring you updates throughout the morning. All right, lawmakers not happy with new revelations about Russian ads on social media during the election. Now, powerhouse tech companies are promising to take action. Authentication efforts to know who's behind the ads.
We finally got to take a look at some of the ads that the Russian Internet Research Agency bought on Facebook and congressmen over how long it has taken these tech companies to sort of play ball and come forward with what they know. Also, a lot of frustration over the question of whether or not these tech companies are actually taking the problem seriously. There's effectively 2 different worldviews here. There's the Silicon Valley worldview, which says, look, we're open platforms. We can't be responsible for everything that comes up on our platforms. We're also global companies. We don't necessarily put the interests of the American government first. Obviously, that did not sit well with the American government, especially in light of what we have learned about Russia's meddling in the U.S. election and in American politics generally. The fact that Russian agents are using issues like race, religion, immigration, and exploiting the tensions that exist in this country in order to sow an atmosphere of discord and influence our politics is something that these lawmakers say represents a grave threat to the sovereignty of the American electoral system, the American democratic project. Back to you guys.
All right, Dylan, thanks. Jurors in the corruption trial of New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez set to hear closing arguments from prosecutors this morning. On Wednesday, the judge spent almost 3 hours delivering final instructions to the panel, imploring them to use common sense when weighing the evidence. Jurors were also ordered to disregard the fact that Menendez and his co-defendant chose not to testify. The Democratic senator is accused of accepting on behalf of that friend's business interests.
The current administration won't do the job, so former President Barack Obama is making the case for his namesake health care law. The 44th president rolling out a video on Twitter and Facebook touting the benefits of the Affordable Care Act as open enrollment gets underway. The Trump administration has been downplaying the sign-up season, slashing advertising for enrollment by 90%, reducing support for outreach and assistance. President Trump marking open enrollment with a tweet to promote repealing the law's individual mandate, which requires Americans to have coverage or pay a penalty.
Michelle Obama taking a subtle swipe at President Trump without referring to him by name. During a conversation with poet Elizabeth Alexander, the former First Lady offered young people this simple advice on tweeting.
This whole tell it like it is business, that's nonsense. You know, you don't just say what's on your mind. You don't tweet every thought. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about us all.
Yes, not just good advice for young people, but old people as well. Mrs. Obama went on to say most initial thoughts are not worth the light of day. And
she also said spell check. She said young people should remember to spell check their tweets.
And old people alike.
Yes, and old people. President Trump says the man accused of mowing down
at your participating Honda power equipment dealer. That's power you can trust. That's a Honda generator.
We have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything.
The president now calling for the death penalty for the suspect in the Manhattan terror attack. His decision to quickly politicize this attack is drawing scorn.
And disturbing details emerging about the suspect. He began planning a year ago, self-radicalized in the U.S. And he says he feels good about what he's done. Welcome back to Early Start. I'm Christine Romans.
I'm Dave Briggs. 30 minutes past the hour. President Trump already taking heavy criticism for politicizing Tuesday's terror attack in Manhattan. may have made things worse with a late-night tweet. The president saying, quote, New York City terrorist was happy as he asked to hang his ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12, should get the death penalty. This tweet came after the suspect was charged in court with providing material support to ISIS, which does carry the death penalty.
Legal experts are quick to point out this sort of public suggestion could taint any jury pool if the suspect is tried in New York. This came hours after Mr. Trump lashed out at the justice system.
Let's go live to Washington, bring in our friend Tal Kopin, CNN political reporter. Good to see you, Tal. All right, let's talk about the president, what he said about the criminal justice system, and how his press secretary, Sarah Sanders, attempted to walk it back. Listen.
We need quick justice, and we need strong justice. Much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughingstock.
That's not what he said.
He said that the system of justice in this country is a joke.
He said the process has people calling us a joke and calling us a laughingstock.
Okay, Tal, we could have a 30-minute conversation about the credibility of the White House podium after that, because that is clearly not in any way, shape, or form what the president said. But let's talk about what the president said and how serious that implication is, saying his criminal justice system is a joke, is a laughingstock.
The implications of that are incredibly serious, as you said, Dave. First of all, when you talk about our justice system, I mean, you are talking about some of the most important parts of our Constitution, and the Supreme Court has heard these cases over and over on our due process rights as Americans, and there are some fundamental aspects of that, including your rights to a fair trial. And yes, sometimes that can make the process go a bit methodically because it ensures that anyone who's charged with a crime has the ability to defend themselves from that crime. But that is a core of our Constitution, which in many ways is the envy of the world, our democratic system. So to have the President of the United States on camera sort of trashing a jewel of justice, it's unusual. And, you know, another aspect of that tweet, divulging information from law enforcement is another remarkable development. So there's a lot that's going on here that's sort of unprecedented when you get into the specifics of it.
Let's look at that tweet from 11:43 last night. New York City terrorist was happy as he asked to hang ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12. Should get the death penalty. This after saying that the American justice system was a laughingstock. I would point out the suspect was apprehended, arrested, has already been charged and appeared in court. And one of the charges, material support to ISIS, does already carry the death penalty. So that's one point. The second point is the president of the United States weighing in on matters like this. I mean, we know this is a president who is, you know, not normal. Like, that's not what I mean to say about normal. Maybe I do mean to say that. No, it just he doesn't act like a traditional president in this way. That could potentially taint a jury pool.
Yeah, can you imagine a defense attorney with this material, you know, polling potential jurors and asking all of them, do you follow the president's tweets? Do you follow the news about the president and what he said about this case? It's almost hard to fathom that we've reached that point, but it's absolutely something that a defense attorney is going to want to at least try in figuring out whether this individual can get a fair trial by jury.
Yeah, 40 million followers the president has on Twitter. No matter how many are bots, that could certainly change a jury pool. Let's talk about, though, all the things the president has said about immigration in the wake of all this, and what the Wall Street Journal, the conservative Murdoch-owned Wall Street Journal, writes about his rhetoric. Quote, it's unfortunate and counterproductive that President Trump's first instinct has been to politicize the tragedy by blaming what else? Immigration. Perhaps we will learn that Uzbekistan is a terror breeding ground from which immigrants need special vetting. But the commander-in-chief in particular should wait for answers before jumping to policy conclusions or exploiting immigration fears. You cover immigration for a living here at CNN. Has anything the president said about extreme vetting or all these various policies protect the United States from future terror attacks?
Well, look, the concept of extreme vetting is a little confusing. Obviously, there's been the travel ban, but certainly the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department have been slowly implementing measures that they believe strengthen their vetting. But, you know, keep in mind there was an insinuation and an outright statement from the White House yesterday that diversity lottery candidates, which is the way that this individual came to the U.S., are not vetted. And that is not true. What is true is that these individuals are selected randomly, but they have to be qualified first. There are some requirements within the law, and then they have to meet the requirements of anyone to enter the United States. And that includes they can't be connected to terror. There's an interview process. There's a security check. And so these individuals coming here are vetted. And you mentioned earlier, there's at least an early belief that some of the radicalization or all of the radicalization may have happened here coming to the U.S. It's not really possible to screen every individual coming to the U.S. in the U.S. whether they will ever commit a bad act someday. That's just not how reality works. And so while there is a call for vetting measures, which is a very important part of our national security, to imply that there wasn't vetting when this individual came here is just not true.
Let's talk a little bit about this part of this, because I was hearing New York officials yesterday talk about, well, wait, the president's own budget proposes cuts, steep cuts for some of these counterterrorism and combating terrorism funds and grants that go to places like New York City. So the president is talking very, very tough about political correctness, but the money in the budget, you know, there's a very clear disconnect between his policies and his rhetoric.
There is absolutely a feeling among lawmakers, it has been since the beginning of the year when the president proposed his budget, that it makes way too steep cuts to some grant programs, really a wide variety of them that help local and state law enforcement prepare for domestic extremism, for terrorism, to try to prevent those things from happening. I have a story up on CNN.com that goes into the numbers, but there are hundreds of millions at stake nationally that the administration has proposed to cut, and a city and state like New York itself stand to lose millions, and that's on top of the administration effort to take away law enforcement funds from some major cities on the immigration sanctuary cities battlefront. So yes, absolutely, the administration has proposed some steep cuts. Now, the Department of Homeland Security says that what it's trying to do is overhaul these programs and make sure that they're efficient and actually work. Right. That's their line. And it's also pretty clear that lawmakers intend to preserve that funding. But certainly it's what the administration has proposed to do.
Right. That's their guideline. That's the White House blueprint. All right, Tala Copen, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
To have her here this morning.
Indeed. All right, as for the terror investigation itself, Sayfullo Saipov now charged with providing material support to ISIS. Authorities say the Uzbekistan native self-radicalized in America after arriving in 2010.
The complaint against him says he chose to strike on Halloween because he believed there would be more civilians on the street. We get more from CNN's Jason Carroll.
Christine, Dave, the suspect appeared in federal court last night. He appeared in a wheelchair. He did not enter a plea. That will come later. He is facing 2 counts, including providing material support to a terrorist organization, and at one point asked if an ISIS flag could be hung in his hospital room. Also, according to the federal complaint, more information revealed as well. He rented that rental truck at 2:06 p.m. on Wednesday, but it was actually on October 22nd that he also rented. Initially, the original plan was for him to go beyond the West Side Highway and continue on to the Brooklyn Bridge, but of course he was stopped when he crashed into that school bus. Once again, learning more about his connection to ISIS from a letter that was left behind near the truck, which basically was written in Arabic and in English, which included ISIS propaganda. Christine, Dave.
All right, Jason Carroll for us in New York. All right, President Trump will name the next chair of the Federal Reserve today, and it could mean current chief Janet Yellen is out of a job. Leading the U.S. Central Bank, of course, is one of the most powerful jobs in the world. The president teased his pick during his cabinet meeting yesterday, told reporters they'd be impressed. The current frontrunner is Fed Governor Jerome Powell. That's what a White House official tells CNN. He's a former investment banker. He's been on the Federal Reserve's board since 2012. A Republican, he would be the first Fed chief in more than 40 years who is not an economist. Now, Yellen's term is up in February, and Powell has been right alongside her for much of her agenda. So there won't be a huge shift in monetary policy if he gets a top job. But regulation, that will likely be another story. He's not as tough on banks as Yellen. Powell largely supports Dodd-Frank. That's the sweeping reforms put in after the financial crisis. But he has opposed parts of the law, the parts that prevent banks from making risky bets with taxpayer money. So look to see if maybe there's a regulation angle there.
So the markets will react favorably, presumably?
I mean, the markets...
02.
Do you have an idea for an invention or new product? Do you think companies would be interested in your idea? Do you want to try to get a patent? Then call InventHelp now for free information.
It took 7 hard-fought games, but the Houston Astros are World Series champs for the first time in their 55-year history, Roman.
And Andy Scholes is so happy. His clothes soaked after the game. The combination of tears of joy and champagne.
Is that what I smell? Tears and champagne.
Tears and champagne for Andy Scholes. Hi, Andy.
I was planning that if we were World Series champions, I was going to do it right there. I don't think that's a stage you can create. It just has to happen. And we're able to win tonight, so perfect timing for me to get engaged.
And this Astros win even more incredible because Sports Illustrated predicted it back in 2014. This was the cover with George Springer on it back then with the title, Baseball's Great Experiment, how they broke down the entire team to build it back up. And check out the cover that they're going to have coming out. The new title, Baseball's Great Prophecy.
Cool.
Yeah,
and guys,
go ahead.
I was going to tell you, I literally became a sports reporter to one day cover one of my Houston sports teams winning a championship. So I guess I need a new dream now because that one has now been fulfilled.
Andy Scholes is going to retire.
They're still
Mic
the
drop,
Rockets.
right?
But you remember then when that Sports Illustrated came out, the prior year they lost 110, 111 games.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
they lost
that
over
year,
100 games 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing. It's called Baseball's Great Experiment because GM Jeff Luhnow said, you know what, the way we're going to win is that we're going to be really bad for a few years, get all these great draft picks. Right. George Springer was the first one. That's why he's on the cover, because I even remember that day when we called it George Springer Day when he got called up because he was the first sign of hope for the Astros, and it certainly paid off in the end, winning a championship.
And he was 3 for 30 ahead of Game 2. They could have easily benched him and never been blamed. So 3 for 30 to MVP. Andy Scholes, congratulations. And to everyone in Houston as well.
All right, 50 minutes past the hour. The scandal over Russian-bought ads has...
Power, performance at any age. Copperfit. Live limitless.
New day. The most news in the morning. Up next on CNN.
All right, police in Thornton, Colorado, looking for a murderer on the loose this morning. They're putting out this picture of a person they want to speak with about this shooting at Walmart just north of Denver. Authorities warning the gunman is armed and dangerous. The suspect shot and killed 3 people, 2 men and a woman, all shot inside the store. The female victim pronounced dead after being transported to a local hospital. We'll keep you up to date with all the details on New Day.
Hollywood director and producer Brett Ratner denying accusations of sexual misconduct. In a Los Angeles Times story, 6 women, including actress Olivia Munn, accuse Ratner. His attorney says Ratner's name will be cleared once the current media frenzy dies down. Ratner is the latest in a series of powerful men in Hollywood and in the media to face sexual misconduct allegations. Now one of the most powerful women in the media is weighing in. I spoke to Martha Stewart and asked her this. Where do you think we are as a moment for women at work? I don't go an hour without someone talking about the revelations about powerful people who've acted inappropriately.
I think it would have been better to call them out originally instead of 15, 20 years later.
They didn't have the power, though.
Well, I had it. I called them out. I remember saying, you know, stay away from me, creep. You know, but you have to feel good about yourself in order to behave in the way that you deem appropriate.
Honestly, a very big topic of conversation among women in all sorts of industries. Our conversation was about her new line at QVC, about her business, how to stay relevant, and this amazing new show with Snoop Dogg. Michelle Obama taking a subtle swipe at President Trump without referring to him by name. During a conversation with poet Elizabeth Alexander, the former First Lady offered young people this simple advice on tweeting.
This whole tell it like it is business, that's nonsense. You know, you don't just say what's on your mind. You don't tweet every thought. I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about us all.
Mrs. Obama went on to say most initial thoughts are not worthy of the light of day. And